Interior ministers from the EU are beginning 2 days of talks in Spain for a fresh attempt to reach agreement on a migration deal. Almost 2,000 people have drowned trying to reach Europe by sea in the first half of this year, and the UN says this year is set to be worse than last. Let's take a look at some of those routes used by migrants desperate to reach the EU. The Eastern Mediterranean route refers predominantly to arrivals in Greece by way of Turkey, but some migrants brave the longer voyage to Italy, believed to offer a better chance for finding a new home. The Central Mediterranean route is used by boats attempting to cross to Italy and Malta, setting out from Libya and Tunisia, among other places. The Western Mediterranean route refers primarily to attempted sea crossings from Morocco to mainland Spain or by land via Spain's enclaves in the African continent, which are part of the EU. Finally, there's the West African Atlantic route of migrants wanting to cross to the Spanish Canary Islands, mainly from Morocco or Senegal. Well, recent shipwrecks of migrant boats off the coast of Greece and Spain's Canary Islands means pressure is mounting to prevent further loss of life. But as DW's Jack Parrick reports, Europe's a long way from finding common ground on how to tackle the problem.
Hundreds of people have already drowned this year as smugglers' boats go down in the Mediterranean Sea. It's raising questions of whether EU policies are to blame. So what are they? Currently, a person seeking asylum in the European Union must apply to the first EU country they arrive in. During the EU's 2015 migration crisis, over 1 million refugees, mainly from Syria, arrived in Greece and Italy. Asylum offices became overwhelmed. Ever since, numerous unsuccessful plans have been proposed to try to force other EU countries to accept transfers of asylum seekers, relieving the pressure on first arrival countries. Finally, in June this year, EU ministers agreed to a complex system for sharing responsibility, or allowing countries to financially assist others if they didn't want to accept more migrants. But Hungary and Poland are trying to torpedo the proposal, saying they refuse to accept migrants or to pay, insisting it will only encourage more people to head to Europe. Stopping that journey before it begins is what the EU calls the external dimension of its migration agenda. The bloc wants to try to prevent people from boarding smugglers' boats on the North African coastline. The EU is offering Tunisia €1 billion to keep people there. It's similar to the 2016 deal the EU struck with Turkey, billions of euros in exchange for retaining more than 3 million Syrians in the country. It worked, but migrant support organisations say it encourages countries like Greece to prevent anyone from arriving in Europe, pushing people back to where they came from, which is illegal under international law. Greece says it's protecting the EU's borders. The EU's border guard Frontex ended its own search and rescue missions in the Mediterranean, called Operation Sophia, in 2020, and now only patrols to enforce borders. It was accused of failing to step in and save lives during the recent shipwreck near Pylos in Greece. But the agency's boss insists they can only inform national border guards of impending tragedies.
That's all we could do, actually.
Now, the EU's fundamental rights officer says Frontex should leave Greece entirely, as it risks being implicated in illegal pushbacks. As things stand, the EU's migration policy remains unresolved. Just as summer arrives and an expected surge of people boarding smugglers' boats try to reach the European Union.
For more, I'm joined now by Alberto Horst Neidhardt. He's the head of the European Migration and Diversity Programme and senior policy analyst at the European Policy Centre. Good to have you with us, Mr. Neidhardt. Now, EU interior ministers are again discussing migration. Are we getting any closer to a final agreement to overhaul EU policy on this highly contentious matter?
Good evening, first of all. I cannot speculate on whether we are any closer today, but indeed today there was a meeting among interior ministers in Spain, and they have focused their talks on the last remaining item among the package of proposals which is currently under negotiation, for which they haven't found a compromise which deals with situations of instrumentalization and situations of crisis. And this is indeed a rather important element of the package where member states continue to disagree on. Some have expressed previously concerns about the possible fundamental rights implications that would come from the derogations in this instrument. Others have instead pushed for more exemptions in the past, most notably Baltic states that are concerned about the repetition of the situation they faced in 2021 when Belarus facilitated the arrivals of thousands at their borders. I think that whether the new pact in the end will be agreed to will not only depend on whether member states will find a compromise on this specific proposal, but most importantly on whether the European Parliament and the Council will manage to find a compromise, common ground on the whole package of reforms. And on these, even though it's hard to predict on whether the outcome of these negotiations will be positive, I can only say that both the Council and the Parliament have never been under so much pressure to get this deal approved.
You've written that the compromise deal reached by EU countries might not even deliver the expected results. Why is that?
Well, because fundamentally, most member states and the Parliament understandably want a EU asylum system which is predictable and reliable. But the text that they have agreed to in June is neither straightforward nor balanced. And this mainly for two reasons. First, because the rules that member states have agreed in principle in June are extremely complicated and full of convoluted operational measures, which makes their operationalization and implementation hard to predict, which could in turn lead to low compliance. And we know that mutual trust between member states is in short supply, and this could affect further mutual trust between them. The second reason is that the texts that they have provisionally agreed to entail far greater responsibilities for southern states than for north states compared to the current system.
We only have a couple of seconds, but I do want to get maybe a yes or no answer because Hungary and Poland are refusing so far to pull their weight. Will the rest of the member states be able to convince them?
I don't think so, which raises the questions of what will happen eventually if they refuse to comply with the rules that will be agreed upon.
That was Alberto Horst Neidhardt. Thank you so much for your time.